Hey, what's up guys? How you doing out there? It's your boy Circus 36 and we are back with another tactic video. We're going to do like a little mini series with these videos to basically give Age of Sigmar players a little bit of help with the rules and just helping them out to get more familiar with the rules so that way they can make better combat decisions. In this video, we're going to talk about retreating and movement and how it's very important to use retreating tactics to help you out on the tabletop. And if you're new here, if you're new to the hobby, this will really help you out because you'll better understand how you can retreat and get out of combat and put pressure elsewhere or get to an objective. Some rules that you may not understand that I didn't understand. And I'm glad that I stumbled across this article by Matthew Mentink, who basically wrote this article. He's been featured on GW2 as well. So shout out to Matt Mentink for these tactics. They're great tools to use and to have in your arsenal, and I can't wait to use these on the tabletop. So we got a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and get started on the first slide. So let's talk about the rules first. So in this series, we're actually going to have a full series of videos talking about each tactic and how you can use them and kind of bring them all together. Some of the things that I talk about in this article basically will be shared on the other videos too as well, so maybe recaps of things that I cover here that may be more in depth on my other videos. So make sure you guys tune into the Tactica series and I'll have this all posted. Let's go ahead and just read the article and I'll talk a little bit about each point and we'll just go on from there. So retreating is wildly underestimated tool in Age of Sigmar. Even though it costs you a few attacks, it's a great way to get your units out of a tight spot and surprise your opponent by pressuring key targets and objectives. In this article, we will discuss a few cool things that you can do to retreat, and I hope this will help you out and inspire you in Age of Sigmar. So first of all, we're going to talk about the rules from GW. Units that are in combat must stay stationary or retreat. Retreating units can run, but they cannot shoot or charge in the same turn. So that is very important. Just keep that in the back of your mind. The ability to run and retreat allows you to retreat your movement plus 1d6, which is huge. You do not have to move directly away from your enemy, but you do need to end your movement outside 3 inches of enemy models. So whenever you retreat, if you cannot fly, which is really awesome because I play Night Hunt and I'm really interested to use the fly ability, instead of backing up and retreating, I can go over my opponent and end my move outside 3 inches, which is pretty crazy. I used to read Night Hunt articles about flying and why it was so important, but now I kind of understand based off of reading these rules. So this means that you can retreat around enemy units towards a better position or over an enemy if you can fly. So that is pretty awesome, and that's something you should consider. Here are the rules written by Games Workshop. Units starting the movement phase within 3 inches of an enemy can either remain stationary or they can retreat. If you choose to retreat, the unit must end its move more than 3 inches away from all enemy units. If a unit retreats, then it can't shoot or charge later in that turn. So that's the official rhetoric. I do know we do have a new manual out for 2020. So if any of these rules change, definitely let me know in the comments below. And like I said, it'll correct me and also help new players so that way they can better understand, because rules change all the time. Because this article was written 3 years ago, but stumbling across it, mostly all of this stuff is still relevant and it can help you on the table. So that was the rules there that I had posted. And that's actually right there, some of the rules. Sorry I didn't post that for you guys. But yeah, so you just have to end your movement outside 3 inches of the enemy unit. And like I said, if you can use fly, it's a little bit better. So let's talk about the next section, which would be when to retreat in Age of Sigmar. So this one's kind of huge. You should ask yourself some key questions when going to retreat in Age of Sigmar. And basically, when you retreat from a fight, you or your opponent will get their units out of combat, allowing your opponent to move and charge in the next turn as well. This means that you should always be aware of the repercussions of your retreat. You should only retreat if you can prevent a unit from being wiped out, if you need to use it as your movement abilities in the next turn, or if you can apply pressure by retreating. So that's really important to kind of take note of that. If you can't do one of those three things, get to a better position, use it to apply pressure to another unit to keep them from going forward. Or, if you need that unit that's actually being wiped out to use their abilities elsewhere, it's probably a good idea to see if you can do a retreat move and maybe even actually add a D6 and run with that to get to a better position, or an objective, which is very important because then you can score points, and scoring points wins. So that is that. Basically, just ask yourself those questions and then you should be fine. And the next section here, we're going to talk about retreating to apply pressure. So basically, the most fun reason to retreat from combat is to surprise your opponent with some unexpected pressure. This can be done more often than you think. Because the retreat is such an underestimated move, people rarely expect you to pull your units out of combat where you have the upper hand. Use this to your advantage. Once you are aware what you can do with the retreat, your opportunities will present, or new opportunities will present themselves. When you understand how it can impact your game with the retreat before you charge, the real magic starts to happen. So in most scenarios where you can retreat to apply pressure, it does not really matter if you can directly impact the game. The danger of the impact you could have in the future turns is often enough to throw your opponent off their game. So that's really cool. Basically, when you're going to retreat, from combat, you can surprise other people. Like I said, the Blade Geist Revenants are good for this. If they're in combat, they can retreat and charge another unit and surprise them. And if you already have another unit that's attacking that unit, plus your Blade Geist also at the same time, it can be a lot of pressure you're putting on your opponent. And one thing that Matt actually mentioned in a later video that I'll cover is that relates to this, is basically you want to go odd numbers when you attack enemy units. So what that means is if there's one enemy unit of 40 models, you want to put two different units on that one model, because then you can attack, then your opponent attacks, then you attack again. So it's an odd attacking sequence, whereas like if they were to have basically 2 units or something like that, you want to come with 3 units, so that way you can get an extra attack over your opponent, if that makes sense. But we'll go into that on another video. Like I said, this one's all about retreating, so it's just some cool things that I kind of got from some of this that kind of turned the light bulb on. And I can't wait to use this on the battlefield, because some of the stuff I did not understand and now I do. So let's talk about pressuring objectives. So this one's actually pretty cool, because getting to an objective scores you points, and scoring points wins games. So it's not always about fighting. Sometimes it's about getting to a good position, so that way you can better control an objective or keep enemies from getting somewhere on the board to wipe out a unit that may be important or something like that. So in this one, in pressuring objectives, let me see here. Basically, Age of Sigmar is an objective-based game, so retreating out of combat to capture and protect an objective is pretty much always a good idea. This is especially good in games in which a last-minute capture can bring you a win. Think of a tied game or scenarios much like Blood and Glory, Take and Hold, and Gifts from the Heavens. Before you charge, friend or foe, you need to know how you can impactfully retreat with your unit. This way, you can use your pile-in move to improve your position for when you want to retreat. So that's really cool, because like I said, piling in is also there's a lot of tips and tricks with piling in too as well, and you want to maximize that pile in to make sure you get enough units in to combat to fight, and you prevent your opponent from being able to pile in all of their models and getting you in a battle and actually making it more beneficial for them. So once you declare that you will retreat a unit, you need to follow through. This means that you cannot rely too much on the result of your run roll. Try to figure out where you need to go with your retreat And if your movement plus 3.5 inches average of your run move will get you there. So you have to measure to make sure that you have enough distance to where you can get away from them without having to worry about someone else coming to you and getting you after that. It is important to think about how you prevent your opponent from following up. Since all objectives have a minimum distance, you need to be in there to capture it. You can simply screen the distance with your unit you just retreated. Be careful that your opponent does not obliterate you on the charge. So keep in mind, 6 inches. 6 inches you have to be within an objective to control that objective. So as long as you are within that 6 inches, the edge of your base could be within that bubble, that objective bubble of 6 inches, and you will be controlling that objective. So if you retreat and you can get away from them to get to an objective and put your models in such a way to where they're kind of in a U shape to where it's protecting the objective so they can't get in, they'll have to fight you right there at that brink. And then you can cause your other units to also charge that unit to stop them from getting the objective, or just hold out until you can get some help. And that's really important. So let's look at some of these tactics that Matt came up with. They're pretty awesome. So check out this diagram here. You have some bloodletters in the center, you have some liberators to the left, and you have your objective to the far right. By charging the bloodletters with my liberators, I prevent my opponent from capturing the objective behind them. So let's see what he does. With my charge and pile in, I try to get as close to the objective as I can. So basically, he uses his charge move. He goes up top, and he doesn't just charge them straight ahead. He charges them like kind of up to the top, like where they are, and he funnels himself around to the backside of the bloodletters, and uses his pile in that way. And then basically, once he ends, he does his retreat in the next turn. He retreats his liberators towards the objective and position them so that way the edge of the base are in range. This way, the bloodletters have to charge me, or if they charge me, they will not be able to capture the objective since they cannot charge through my liberators. So if you remember that 3-inch bubble that each model has, you can't come within 3 inches of any enemy model. So that's why he has them staggered out, kind of like, 1 inch away from each other, so that way if they go to run, they have to roll, their dice and try to get in there, and they wouldn't be able to funnel themselves around. But also, it just makes it harder for them to try to pile in and get to the objective. He also has them 6 inches away from the objective, so they can't even pile in or move past that with their roll, which is really smart. So you have to think about these things, the distances you are away from the objectives, and also how you can keep them from getting to certain key units and casters and healers and things you don't want dead, which is something I totally didn't even think about. Keeping your casters alive, yes, but ways that you can space things out to where people can't get to certain units is widely underestimated. So in this next section, we're going to talk about pressuring key targets. I'm sorry, I didn't finish that. Pressuring key targets. So pressuring key targets. Let's see. Basically, the same as with retreating towards an objective can be done with key targets, except that you would need to be able to charge next turn. So when you retreat towards an enemy unit, you need to have a clear goal in mind. Do you need to destroy this enemy unit, or is forcing it out of position enough? Most support units need to be within a certain range of all allies. Forcing these units away from others can sometimes be enough. Since you need to be able to charge your next turn to pressure your opponent's key targets, it is important that your opponent cannot lock you in combat in the next turn. So when you plan to charge a unit with the goal of retreating from it on the next turn, make sure that you have the means to stay ahead. Have another unit standing by that can charge in as well, or do it with fast flying units. So he's got another tactica, basically, like where he's showing what's happening here. So basically, check this out. In this scenario, his liberators are charged by 10 bloodletters. My liberators are supported by my Lord Celestin, and the bloodletters are supported by a blood secretor. So the blood secretor is the guy to the far right, just standing by himself. Bloodletters are the red guys in the center there. You got your liberators upside them, and you got your Lord Celestin is in the very back there. So basically, the liberators are charged by the bloodletters. The red guys hit the gold guys, pretty much is what's happening. And this is for people that are all new to as well. I mean, some people may not know the names, so that's why I'm kind of breaking it down for you. So the bloodletters basically rush into the liberators. In my turn, I retreat my liberators away from the bloodletters towards the blood secretor and charge the bloodletters with my Lord Celestin. This way, I can charge the blood secretor in the next turn without the bloodletters being able to stop me. So see, he kind of moves his units up towards the top there and puts them at a distance to where he's far away from the bloodletters, so that way they can't really get to him. And they also would now have to pile in towards the closest unit, which would be the Lord Celestin. You have to pile in towards the closest enemy, and that is the rule. So by him disengaging, he can get away from them, and he also can pick and choose who he wants to charge. So he could go back to the bloodletters and charge them if he wanted to, or he could go over to the blood secretor. And what's cool about this is, like, when you go to charge a unit, for some armies, you actually do mortal wounds on the charge or something like that, or you just do damage on the charge. So this could be really crazy to use these retreat moves just to get some extra damage. And that may be something that you wouldn't be thinking about if you're stuck in combat. You may think that you're just stuck there, you know. So by charging my Lord Celestin on the outer model of the bloodletters, they can only pile in with a few models to ensure the survival of my hero. So if you notice, he only has one touching the base. You only can pile in up to 3 inches. So that's really important that you can only pile in up to 3 inches, because that means that once he gets his models in, maybe only 2, maybe 3 might get in out of those 10. So you're not taking a full 10 attacks. You're only taking 2 or 3, which is crazy. And so this is going to be able to make sure your hero stays alive. And then these liberators can kill that hero over there and potentially, you know, get back to the bloodletters and finish them off. So pretty important. Like I said, you know, these tactics kind of help me out, like, just to see how you can disengage and go back into combat and, you know, go to a different position and, you know, better yourself. So now we're going to talk a little bit about double turns. Double turns is awesome. I'm going to do a whole full video on double turns too as well. So just be looking out for that. Retreating to apply pressure is especially good if you have the opportunity to get a double turn. The double turn allows you to immediately follow up with a charge and fully screen an objective. Never count on double turns. They're always 50-50 chance you will get them or not. You can read more about double turns in this article here. And so I'm actually going to talk about Matt Mintink's article too as well about double turns and how to utilize them, get the most out of them. So this is really important. Like I said, you can set your models up in a way to where you can prepare for that double turn, so that way you can benefit and get to a better position and also get ahead of your opponent before they get their next turn. Keep in mind though, if you do give them the first, or if you do give them the second turn and you take the first turn, they do have the opportunity of getting that double turn. So keep in mind, sometimes it's better to go second than first. It just depends on the situation, the army you're facing, and what's going on. So, okay. So now we're going to talk about retreating from a losing fight. This one is pretty cool. I actually like this next one here. Has some pretty good information. So, the most usual situation to retreat from a losing fight. These fights are easily recognizable from the pile of dead models and the smug look on your opponent's face, which is pretty funny. Before deciding if you want to retreat your unit, try to analyze the situation. In what state is your retreating unit? Are you still strong enough to have an impact in a different combat? Are there any objectives that you can claim? Or is there any units that you can basically disengage from to go help another unit that may need some help? Because if you can't do one of those four things, then, you know, what's the point of retreating? Like, you always have to look around the battlefield, see if somebody needs help, see if there's something open that you can take, see if you can save this unit, you know, to resurrect some more models in that unit to keep them around. There's all different types of reasons why you would want to retreat, for survivability and sustain. If there is no other thing that your unit can do, you need to figure out if it would be better for as a whole to stay in combat or not. How long can they survive, and is it important for that unit to stay in combat while they're tied up? When you have decided that you want to retreat, and you know where to go, it's time to figure out how you can keep them out of harm's way. Because once you leave, you basically got to make sure you're not going to get countercharged, or you're going to be in range of like an enemy spell or something that could basically take you out or zap you when you're not paying attention, you know. So you definitely want to check that out and make sure no one's around you, and just measure and make sure that you've got your distances right. Okay, so now we're going to talk about retreating for mobility. So this one's actually pretty cool because sometimes you just need to get around, and because you can run and use that D6, you can better position yourself and, you know, just get to where you could get buffed or healed, or, you know, there's all types of things, or just get to an objective, which is huge. So basically, retreating for mobility. When you are stuck in combat and you cannot charge or use movement abilities, some units in Age of Sigmar do not dish out a lot of damage, but are very hard to kill. These units are excellent at keeping a unit pinned down to protect other units and objectives. We call this a tar pit. Now, tar pits are really good to have, you know, just because, you know, they kind of just lock the enemy in place to where they can't do anything. I use the chain ras hordes or like my skeleton warriors to lock people down all the time, and that's a good strategy to have because, you know, you can always resurrect those back, and, you know, when you're doing 3-4 attacks per model, I mean, that can add up to a lot if you're getting 10 of those guys in combat, or, you know, just anything like that. So, you know, tar pits help out. They keep people from getting to certain areas, and they block people from getting to objectives, and that's the good thing you want to use them for. So basically, the slide says, even though the damage output of tar pits is pretty low, it does ramp up over a few turns and takes away your ability to move. If you cannot destroy a tar pit within the next 1 or 2 turns, you need to use a movement ability to charge next turn. It is time to get out of combat with them ASAP. So if you find yourself, you know, turn 2, turn 3, you know, you're still in combat with them, it's probably better to just get away, for sure. You can do this the same way you would with any other unit, except it is extra important that you prevent other units from the same fate. Try to pin down the enemy tar pit with a cheap unit while keeping the damage they take at a minimum. So that's awesome. Just try to get them in combat with something less important that you really don't care about, and yeah, you should be fine. Stopping the pursuit is the next one. In most cases, you do not want your opponent pursuing your fleeing units just to have them stuck in combat the next turn. Prevent the pursuit by moving far enough, locking the enemy unit down, or screening your opponents away. So that's pretty important. Just measure around. You know, you can ask your opponent, how far does this unit move that's next to me or close to me? And, you know, if they tell you what the distance is, make sure you measure with your movement and say, oh, well, I don't want to end my movement this way. I want to kind of position myself to where I'm a little bit far away, or it'll just be out of their means to where they won't attempt to try to charge me and they'll go somewhere else. This next one is locking a unit down. So this one is probably, this tactic right here is probably one of the ones that was kind of like the jaw dropper for me. And I kind of knew a little bit about this, but I didn't know that it went to this extent and that you can use this tactic to actually split cohesion, which is huge. So locking down large enemy units can be dangerous, but there are quite a few ways that you can reduce damage your units will take. One of these is preventing your opponent from piling in. You can do this by making the required pile-in distance as big as you can, or by making it impossible for your enemy to pile in without losing unit cohesion. So if you check out the diagram here, basically he says, by positioning my 2 dragon nobles, which are the 2 guys to the far left, by positioning these 2 dragon nobles to the far edges of the unit of the bloodletters, the enemy bloodletters can hardly pile in without breaking cohesion. This allows me to survive significantly longer than I would on the if I charge them straight ahead. Straight ahead, right into the bloodletters will be bad news bears. Be careful when enough of the bloodletters get in the nobles, into the nobles, it's gonna hurt. So this is true that bloodletters do hit like a truck in numbers, and like I said, if you charge them straight ahead, they'll be able to use that 3-inch pile in and wrap themselves around your units and just jack you up. They'll get all their attacks in. But if you were to split these two and go to the corners, if you notice this picture to the far right, if models are not within 1 inch of each other, you break cohesion. So because you have to pile into the closest enemy, you have 2 enemies you're fighting. So think of this. You have the bloodletters sitting there, and they have to pile in to both units. So if that very center were to pile, or the very edges were to pile in and pull that center out, they're going past 1 inch and they're breaking cohesion, which would cause those units to be killed or flee, or they would just be done. You're out of cohesion. So, and this also prevents them from piling in, which is the most important point that they're trying to make here, is that you have to make a rough decision. Do I just let 1 bloodletter attack and just call it a day, or maybe 2 or 3, or do I break cohesion and risk more models? So this is a tactic that I think people don't utilize. I don't see it on the table very often. The games I play, I didn't see anybody doing this tactic at all. So it was pretty eye-opening for me to see this, because it kind of turns the light bulb on. Like, bing, you can do that. And, you know, for a new beginner that's starting out in Age of Sigmar, rules like this you wouldn't see offhand until you really study the rules and kind of understand where they're coming from. This is an example. In this example, we talk about getting the most out of the charge. So there will be a video about charging and talking about how to get the most out of your charge and when you should charge and asking questions before you charge. Because just because you can charge doesn't mean you should charge. And you could save it for another time when it's beneficial. So we'll have a video on that too as well by Matt Minting. So just keep a watch for these tactic videos. And like I said, I'll keep shouting him out, because a lot of this stuff definitely helped me out for sure. So screening and zoning. There's gonna be a whole video on area denial, screening, and zoning. I'm gonna be doing too as well, but this is just a brief summary of screening and zoning and what you should do with it, and what it has to do with retreating too as well. So screening can be done with a unit that can withstand the charge, that is cheap enough to sacrifice, or a unit you just retreated with, hoping your opponent will fail the charge. So since models within a unit can be 1 inch away from another model, you can spread your units out to create screens against the charge. This is great to protect other units and objectives, or preparing for devastating counter charges. So this is really huge. If you notice, every model from the far right to the far left basically are all 1 inch away. And as long as they're within that inch, you can do like daisy chains and kind of go wrap yourself around your heroes, like that necromancer you see there. You've got all of them wrapped around him, so that way nobody can charge him or get into him to kill him. You'd have to face the other units first. And because those other units to the far right are 6 inches away from the objective, they've pushed themselves out, so somebody would have to pile into them, and they still would not score any points. That's the key right there. So just make sure that the distance between your models is not big enough for your opponent to charge through. Because people can also, they can summon themselves over here. If you can see my mouse, they can summon themselves towards the back of the field over here. You know, people can summon units in and just cause a lot of trouble for you. So because all the skeleton warriors are within 1 inch of another, the unit of 20 skeletons can easily protect the necromancer and the objective while still staying in unit cohesion. That is huge. And there's a whole article that's going to be a whole topic, excuse me, a whole topic that I'm going to talk about: area denial, zoning, and all that stuff. So that way you know how to put your models in a certain formation that'll get you the biggest bubble to where people can't charge you, and you also can prevent them from getting to the objectives. So with that being said, this brings us to the summary, the very end of the video. This is basically just a wrap up of everything. So basically, there's a few scenarios that you basically just have to kind of ask yourself, just ask yourself questions while you're in these games. And when you study these types of notes, you basically just, during each phase, you want to ask, how can I maximize in this phase and get the most out of it? Depending on your army, certain armies have different strengths. So you just use your army's strengths and their weaknesses to your advantage. So at the top it says only retreat only retreat in one of 3 scenarios. You can save one unit without sacrificing another, which is huge. You need to use movement abilities or charge in your next turn. So that could be like taking the Blade Geist Revenants, moving them away out of combat, putting them in a better position, and then charging someone else that's a better target that you can get rid of. You can apply pressure to objectives or key targets, and that's huge too as well. If you need to retreat to get to an objective, get out of combat, say forget you can come to me and fight, or get to a better position to where you could be healed or have units brought back is huge. Apply pressure by retreating towards an objective, using your charge and pile in to get closer. That's a huge tactic. Capturing the objective with the outer edge of your base models, that's huge. Screening the objective to prevent your opponent from capturing it with the charge and pile in, that's huge. Towards a key target, using your charge and pile in to get closer and preventing the pursuit. Stop the pursuit by screening with a cheap or durable unit, moving further than your opponent can move and charge, which is awesome, and locking your opponent down with another unit. So if you could stop people from getting to other places, that sometimes can get another unit that's free to move into a better position to get them over to an objective. So that way they have to pick and choose. Do I fight this tar pit that just locked me up? Or do I go after this guy that just went towards the objective? Either way, if I go towards the objective, I'm probably going to get charged by both units, and then it's going to be bad for me either way. So it kind of just puts the thoughts in your opponent's mind, like, should I make a better decision, or should I like just altogether avoid them and go somewhere else? And like I said, once you use retreating to your advantage, you can win a lot of games because you know ways to get around the board, and you realize that you don't have to stay in the combat, and that you can better position your models and save them from just taking all the attacks. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, before I read this article, I didn't know a lot of these points, so it's kind of eye-opening as, you know, a new player. I mean, I've been painting for 2 years now, but I'm still a new player in the sense that I haven't played many games, especially with COVID going on. And somebody that's coming into the hobby using these type of tactics will help them understand like what they should watch out for. So this has been Retreating by Matt Mentink. Go check him out. I will definitely leave his links here so you guys can check him out really quick. He's awesome. I'm not really sure if he's still wargaming or not, but this article was written 3 years ago along with the other 10 articles that he wrote, and he just has tabletop tactics, but he does have a website that you can go to. So support this guy. You can go to AoSTactics.com. You can go to Wayland Games and buy some models there to support him. And like I said, you know, he's spreading some good news, you know, and just some tactics on how to help you on the battlefield. So definitely check him out. Thanks guys for checking out my little presentation here. I will be doing a Tactica series on all of his articles because I think they will be very beneficial to new players and also to myself. And you can come back and watch these videos and just see, you know, like basically what I need to do in certain situations during certain phases and how can I capitalize with my army. So basically this is a wrap up of Retreating in Age of Sigmar. You can also use these tactics, I'm sure, in 40k too as well. But if you guys have any other ways to retreat or any other tactics or any other advice that you want to give me, basically a new player, leave them in the comments below. We'll talk about them. We'll debate about them. And like I said, if you're new to the page, definitely drop a like and follow on the page. I really appreciate the support. And like I said, just look out for more games and more model painting on my channel here. So thanks a lot, guys. Thanks to Matt Minting. Definitely send him a shout out. And yeah, happy wargaming. Hope you guys have a good day. Peace.